Imagine this.
Okay.
It's 1985,
Mm-hmm.
a warm spring evening in South Carolina.
Okay.
You're at home, your daughter, just 2 days away from graduating high school. She pulls into the driveway after a perfectly normal day. You glance out the window, see her car stop at the mailbox,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
she's gone.
Oh, wow. Vanished.
It's a parent's worst nightmare, and in this case, the nightmare only gets worse.
Yeah.
We're diving into the chilling story of Sherry Smith and Deborah Helmick,
Okay.
two young girls abducted and murdered in a case that shook South Carolina to its core.
Wow.
We've got some incredible source material to work with on this deep dive. Original FBI files,
Oh, wow.
news reports from the time,
Yeah.
and even a book by the legendary profiler John Douglas,
Oh, wow.
who was directly involved in the investigation.
That's amazing. Having access to Douglas's firsthand account is invaluable. He was a pioneer in the field of criminal profiling, and his insights help us understand the twisted psychology behind these kinds of horrific crimes.
Absolutely. So let's start with Sherry's disappearance on May 31st, 1985. She'd had a typical day for a teenager, a pool party, shopping with friends, calling home regularly to check in with her parents. It was all very ordinary, until it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what makes it all the more terrifying. It highlights the vulnerability we all face in our everyday lives. The idea that something so horrific could erupt from the mundane.
Exactly. Sherry's dad, Robert,
Hmm.
was working from home that day and actually saw her pull into the driveway. He left the room for just a few minutes. And when he returned, her car was still there, driver's side door open. But Sherry was nowhere in sight.
Oh, gosh.
Now, here's a detail that adds another layer of complexity to the situation.
Okay.
Robert's initial concern wasn't actually that Sherry had been abducted. She was diabetic
Right.
and needed regular medication. So his first thought was that she might have become disoriented and wandered off.
Oh,
He searched the woods near their home, but found nothing. When he checked her car and saw that her purse, with her medication inside, was still there, he knew something was terribly wrong and immediately called 911.
oh, wow.
The assistant sheriff who responded to the call had a gut feeling that this wasn't a typical runaway case.
Right.
He made a crucial decision to bypass the standard 24-hour waiting period for reporting a missing person, recognizing the urgency of the situation.
Right.
Thank goodness he did.
Yeah.
A large-scale search was launched, but the intense heat hampered their efforts, and the lack of physical evidence at the scene only deepened the mystery.
Yeah. The absence of evidence in a case like this is almost as telling as its presence. It speaks to a level of premeditation, control, and awareness that is truly chilling.
3 days after Sherry vanished, the phone rang at the Smith home. It was a man with a distorted voice, telling Sherry's parents that he had her, and that they would receive a letter.
Wow. That's chilling.
The letter arrived, and it was a forced last will and testament in Sherry's handwriting.
Oh.
A heart-wrenching goodbye message to her family.
A forced suicide note. It's a level of cruelty designed to inflict maximum pain and break the family's spirit. It speaks volumes about the perpetrator's psyche.
It was absolutely horrific, desperate for any leads. The police reached out to the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit, and that's where John Douglas enters the picture. He began working on a profile of the abductor based on the limited information they had.
Okay.
What's fascinating about Douglas's approach is that he wasn't just looking at the physical evidence. He was analyzing the killer's behavior, the way he interacted with the victims' families, the language he used. It was a whole new way of looking at criminal investigation.
Yeah. That is fascinating.
Douglas concluded that they were most likely dealing with a white male in his late 20s or early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
He theorized that the abductor had a sadistic and narcissistic personality, was meticulous in his planning and execution, and probably had a criminal history. He suggested that this criminal history might have started with voyeuristic offenses, gradually escalating to more violent acts, which is a pattern we see in many cases involving sexual assault and abduction.
Right, yeah.
Trying to get the abductor to contact them again. The police had Sherry's family make an appearance on local television. And it worked. He called again, demanded they stop the search, and dropped a cryptic clue, saying, "Forget Lexington County, look in Saluda County."
Wow.
This is classic control behavior. He's dictating their actions, enjoying the power he wields over them. And that vague clue, it's a taunt, a way of showing them he's always one step ahead.
Yeah.
And it gets worse. In another chilling call, he tells Sherry's mother, Hilda, "Sherry is now a part of me, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Our souls are one now."
Yeah. That's incredibly disturbing.
That statement is incredibly disturbing. It suggests a complete distortion of intimacy and a delusional sense of possession. He's trying to merge his identity with Sherry's, to erase her individuality and make her an extension of himself. The investigators were able to trace the calls to payphones. But each time, the man was gone by the time they arrived. Then, he made a chilling demand, instructing them to have an ambulance ready at the Smith house because, according to him, Sherry's condition was deteriorating.
Oh my God.
He was preparing them for the inevitable, dragging out their agony, and using their fear and desperation as a weapon. It's psychological torture at its most insidious.
Yeah.
Finally, he gave them specific directions, down to the 10th of a mile, to where they could find Sherry. It was a remote location in Saluda County, near a Masonic lodge. Remember how John Douglas theorized that the killer might revisit the crime scene? This meticulous detail seems to support that theory. It's as if he's relishing the memory of his crime, drawing the investigators back to the place where he asserted his dominance.
Right.
Following his instructions, they found Sherry's body, tragically. The intense heat had accelerated decomposition, making it difficult to determine the exact cause of death. The weather, a cruel twist of fate, became an accomplice to the killer, erasing potential evidence and adding another layer of anguish to an already unbearable situation.
Yeah.
But even with the discovery of Sherry's body, the story was far from over. The killer called again, this time demanding to speak with Sherry's older sister, Dawn. He said, "This thing got out of hand, and all I wanted to do was make love to Dawn." And then he corrected himself. "I'm sorry, it's Sherry."
What?
That slip of the tongue, calling Dawn Sherry, is incredibly revealing. It suggests that his focus is shifting, that he might be transferring his obsession from one sister to another. And that raises a terrifying question. Is Dawn now in danger?
Oh my gosh. That's terrifying. It's a chilling thought, and it's made even more disturbing by what he says next, he claims, and I am a family friend. That's the sad part.
This statement, whether true or not, is another attempt to control the narrative and insert himself into their lives. It's a tactic meant to deepen their pain and create even more confusion and fear. He then admits to sexually assaulting Sherry, but in a way that downplays his actions, almost as if it were consensual. He describes her death. He gave her 3 choices: shooting, drug overdose, or suffocation.
Oh gosh.
Of course, this idea of choice is utterly absurd. It's another way for him to manipulate the situation and portray himself as having some twisted sense of mercy. It's all part of his need for control.
Right.
He hangs up, and once again, they manage to trace the call but can't catch him. He's always one step ahead. Now, with the investigation at a standstill and Dawn potentially in danger, John Douglas proposes a risky plan. Hold a graveside memorial service for Sherry and use it as bait to draw the killer out.
Wow. Okay.
It's a high-stakes gamble. They're putting Dawn at risk, hoping to use her as a lure to catch a murderer. But Douglas, with his understanding of criminal psychology, believes the killer is monitoring their every move, feeding off the attention. They even go so far as to place a stuffed koala, Sherry's favorite animal, at the grave, hoping he might try to take it as a trophy. But before the memorial, Douglas wants to use an even more powerful lure. Dawn herself. Douglas wants to use an even more powerful lure. He coaches her on how to keep the killer talking if he calls. Douglas wants to use an even more powerful lure, giving the police more time to trace the call.
Okay.
This takes an incredible amount of courage on Dawn's part. She's essentially confronting the man who likely murdered your sister and maybe targeting her next. It's a testament to her strength and resilience.
Wow. That's incredible.
And as soon as the memorial service is announced, the killer calls again. This time, there's no voice modulator. He's more confident, more brazen. He demands to speak with Dawn, telling her, "God wants you to Cherry Bay. It's just a matter of time. This month, next month, this year, next year. You can't be protected all the time."
Oh my God.
Those are chilling words. A clear indication that he views Dawn as his next victim. The clock is ticking, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But then, he reveals something even more horrifying. He tells Dawn that he has abducted another girl, 9-year-old Deborah Helmick. He even gives detailed directions to where they can find her, just like he did with Sherry.
Oh no.
This confirms what Douglas suspected. This man is a serial predator. He hasn't stopped. His need for control and dominance is escalating.
Right.
The police rush to the location and find Deborah's body, tragically. Just like with Sherry, she was left to decompose in the intense heat. And there's a particularly disturbing detail. In addition to her own underwear, Deborah is also wearing a pair of adult-sized underwear.
Oh my goodness.
This discovery raises a horrifying question.
Oh.
Are there other undiscovered victims? Douglas believed this was likely not the killer's first crime. He likely had a history of violence and predatory behavior.
Yeah, it's possible.
So now, they have 2 murdered girls and a killer who is playing a terrifying game with the authorities and the families. They hope he'll show up at Sherry's memorial service, which is also on her 18th birthday. They're ready for him. But he never appears. His absence is telling. He's reveling in the fear he's created.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to be physically present to maintain his dominance. He's controlling the situation from a distance. And that's almost more terrifying.
Right.
Deborah's funeral is the next day. And again, they search for him among the mourners, but he's nowhere to be found. However, back at the lab, there's finally a breakthrough. The FBI uses a new technique called ESDA, or electrostatic detection apparatus,
Yeah.
on Sherry's forced suicide note. This technology can reveal indentations from the page above, uncovering hidden writing.
Interesting.
It's almost like X-ray vision for documents. They were looking for any clue,
Yeah.
any trace. And this technology provided a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
They discovered what appeared to be a grocery list. And more importantly, a partial phone number with an Alabama area code. It's missing 1 digit, but it's their first real lead. They traced the number to a man named Joe Shepard, who lives in Alabama. However, it turns out Joe isn't their guy. He's just a link in the chain. Joe explains that the number belongs to his parents' house in Lake Murray, South Carolina. And a man named Larry Gene Bell was house sitting for them.
Okay.
And what's even more chilling, Joe's father is an electrician, the very profession John Douglas suspected the killer might have. The police rush to the Shepard house, but quickly realize that the father, Ellis, isn't their man either. But when they describe the suspect to Ellis and his wife Sharon, both of them immediately say, "You're talking about Larry Gene Bell."
Wow.
Sometimes. It's not a complex scientific analysis, but basic human observation that cracks a case wide open. The Shepard's recognition of Bell from the description is a turning point in the investigation.
Yeah.
They explained that Bell had been working for Ellis as an electrician and had been house-sitting for them. They also mentioned that Bell had been acting strangely since they returned. Losing weight, growing a beard, obsessing over the murders. Their observations are crucial. They highlight a change in Bell's behavior, a shift that coincides with the timeline of the murders. It paints a picture of escalating deviance, a descent into darkness.
Right.
The police search the house, find women's underwear similar to what was found on Deborah, and learn that Bell has taken Ellis's gun. They have enough evidence to get an arrest warrant.
Okay.
They arrest Bell the next morning. He denies everything, but the investigators aren't giving up. John Douglas suggests setting up a unique interrogation room, surrounding Bell with images of the victims, maps, and even a stuffed koala.
Wow.
This tactic is designed to break down his defenses. They want to immerse him in reminders of his crimes, create a psychologically charged environment that might elicit a confession. Bell remains defiant, so they decide to bring in Dawn and her mother. Douglas instructs Dawn to tell Bell that she recognizes his voice. She enters the room and says, "It's you. I know it's you. I recognize your voice. I know it's you."
Wow, that's powerful.
Bell's response is chilling. He says, "All I know is that." The good Larry Gene Bell couldn't have done this crime, but the bad Larry Gene Bell could very well have done that.
Wow. So he's trying to separate himself.
It's almost as if he's trying to convince himself more than anyone else, trying to separate himself from the monster who committed these awful acts.
Exactly. It's a classic defense mechanism, creating a psychological distance from his own actions. But the evidence against him is overwhelming.
The women's underwear, the missing gun, the behavioral changes, the phone calls, his own words. It all points to Larry Gene Bell.
Yeah.
The trial is swift, and in 1986, he's convicted of the murders of both Sherry Smith and Deborah Helmick. He's sentenced to death.
Wow.
A small measure of justice for those families. But it can never truly erase their pain. And there's that lingering question that hangs over this entire case. Could there be other victims out there?
John Douglas firmly believed there were Bell's meticulous nature, his escalating pattern of criminal behavior. And the evidence found at the Shepard's house all suggest a history of violence that likely predates Sherry and Deborah.
It's a chilling thought that there might be other families out there who never got answers, whose lives were shattered by this man.
It adds another layer of tragedy to an already heartbreaking story. And it underscores the importance of understanding these kinds of predators, of recognizing the warning signs and patterns of escalation.
This deep dive has taken us to some very dark places. We've explored the depths of human cruelty and the devastating impact of these horrific crimes.
But it's also a testament to the dedication of investigators like John Douglas, who dedicated their lives to seeking justice and trying to unravel the complexities of the criminal mind.
It leaves us with a lot to think about. The question of what drives someone to commit such acts, the importance of vigilance and awareness, and the need to support those who have been affected by these kinds of tragedies.
And perhaps by learning from these cases, by understanding the psychology of the perpetrators, we can work towards a future where these tragedies become less frequent.
It's a goal worth striving for. A world where monsters like Larry Jean Bell are stopped before they have the chance to destroy innocent lives. A world where families don't have to endure the unimaginable pain and loss that Sherry and Deborah's families faced. And with that, we conclude our deep dive into this chilling case. We encourage you to delve further into the source material if you're interested in learning more. And as always, stay vigilant, stay informed, and take care.